Hey there, welcome back to Undercover Mysteries. Today, we're diving into 3 heart-pounding stories of cave diving gone horribly wrong. In each of these tales, divers faced moments where one wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. As we journey deeper into these stories, you'll soon realize that the most dangerous parts of the caves aren't what you can see, it's what you don't see coming. Let's get started. Nestled deep within the rugged landscapes of Norway's Rana municipality lies Plura, the deepest and most extensive cave system in Northern Europe. This underwater labyrinth is both a siren's call and a death trap for thrill-seeking cave divers from around the world. Its allure lies in the beauty of its vibrant, submerged caves. Yet beneath its surface, the Plura cave system hides a treacherous path that has claimed more than its fair share of lives, particularly during Norway's harsh winters when the surface of Lake Plura freezes over, encasing the entrance in a formidable barrier of ice. On February 6, 2014, 5 Finnish divers, seasoned veterans of the sport, embarked on a mission that would test their courage, skill, and resolve to the utmost limits. These men were not newcomers to the dangers of cave diving. They had faced the perils of the deep before, navigating through some of the most challenging underwater passages in Europe. However, this dive was different. It was to be the culmination of their experiences, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and testing the very limits of what was possible beneath the earth. Their destination was Sterkfontein, a remote and perilous cave within the Plura system, accessed only through a network of narrow underwater tunnels. The dive was planned to take approximately 5 hours, with the men descending to depths exceeding 130 meters, far beyond the comfort zone of even the most experienced cave divers. For most amateur divers, an hour at 30 meters would be considered a significant achievement. But for these 5 men, this dive was an opportunity to achieve something extraordinary, something few others could claim. The expedition began in the early morning hours, with the men cutting a triangular hole in the ice covering Lake Plura. They slipped into the icy depths, encased in waterproof dry suits and laden with advanced diving equipment designed to withstand the extreme pressures and temperatures they would encounter. From the moment they entered the water, the risks were evident. The deeper they dove, the colder and darker the water became, the tunnels narrowing to the point where even a slight mistake could mean disaster. Jagged rocks protruding from the cave walls threatened to tear through their suits and equipment, while the ever-present danger of hypercapnia, a potentially deadly buildup of carbon dioxide, loomed large over the entire expedition. Patrick Grankvist led the group, a seasoned diver who, along with 2 others, had discovered the passage between Plura and Sterkfontein the previous year. His close friend, Jari Hinen, accompanied him, attempting the full traverse for the first time. The dive began smoothly, with the men descending into the inky blackness of the cave, their path illuminated only by the beams of their flashlights. But as they reached the deepest section of the cave, 110 meters below the entrance, disaster struck. Grankvist realized that Hinen was no longer behind him. Panic gripped him as he circled back, searching desperately for his friend. When he finally found Hinen, he was trapped in a narrow section of the cave, ensnared by a cord from his diving equipment. Hinen was signaling frantically with his flashlight, the only way he could communicate his distress in the pitch-black water. Grankvist knew the danger his friend was in. Hinen was panicking, his breathing becoming erratic, which meant he was at serious risk of hypercapnia. Grankvist acted quickly, attempting to calm Hinen and offering him a gas cylinder to help reduce the carbon dioxide in his system. But as Hinen tried to switch mouthpieces, tragedy struck. His panic overwhelmed him, and he began to gasp for air, inadvertently inhaling water instead. Grankvist could only watch in horror as his friend drowned before his eyes, his struggles growing weaker until finally he was still. The shock of witnessing his friend's death was overwhelming, but Grankvist knew he had to control his own emotions and breathing to avoid the same fate. He could not afford to panic, not now, not here, deep within the heart of the cave. After a futile attempt to free Hinen's body, he realized he had no choice but to continue towards Steinlaflaga. The journey ahead was fraught with danger. Not only did he have to navigate the treacherous tunnels, but he also faced the risk of decompression sickness, a potentially deadly condition that could strike if he ascended too quickly after spending so much time at such extreme depths. As Grankvist pressed on, the second team of divers, led by Visa Ranin, was following behind. Ranin was the first to encounter Hinen's body, and he was faced with a gut-wrenching decision: turn back or continue. After weighing his options, he chose to press on, but the delay in navigating around the body added several hours to his decompression time. When Ranin finally surfaced, he was in agony, suffering from the early stages of decompression sickness. The pain in his joints, a common symptom of the condition, grew worse with each passing hour, a grim reminder of the dangers they faced in the depths. Meanwhile, the third diver, Jari Uzumaki, was dealing with his own nightmare. Upon discovering Hinen's lifeless body, Uzumaki panicked, his mind overwhelmed by the sight of his dead friend. In his terror, he overloaded his rebreather with carbon dioxide, a mistake that would prove fatal. Despite the efforts of the fifth diver, Kai Kenan, to assist him, Uzumaki could not regain control and drowned just 20 meters from where Hinen's body lay. Kenan, shaken but determined to survive, made the grueling journey back to the starting point, breaking through a thin layer of ice as he finally resurfaced nearly 11 hours after the dive began. All three surviving divers were immediately hospitalized with decompression sickness, their bodies racked with pain from the bends. Local authorities took their statements, and the Plura cave system was temporarily closed to prevent further tragedies. The loss of Hinen and Uzumaki sent shockwaves through the Finnish diving community, and word of the disaster soon reached Sami Pakarinen, a diving instructor and close friend of the deceased, who was teaching in Mexico at the time. Pakarinen spent hours on a Skype call with British cave diver Rick Stanton, a man renowned for his rescue and recovery work in some of the world's most dangerous underwater caves. Stanton had already heard about the accident and was preparing to assist in retrieving the bodies of the two divers. 2 weeks later, he, along with divers John Volin and Jason Mallison, made the arduous journey to Norway to begin the recovery operation. However, the mission proved more challenging than anticipated. The narrow passage where Hinen's body was lodged blocked access to Uzumaki, making it impossible to reach him from the Steinlaflaga side of the tunnel. The divers considered returning to their point of origin and attempting to dive backward through the system, but the risks were too great. The recovery was called off, and the Norwegian police declared the operation too dangerous to continue. Devastated by the failure, but resolute in his determination, Grankvist made a solemn promise to Hinen's widow. He vowed to bring her husband's body back, no matter the cost. It was an unspoken code among divers. No one gets left behind, not even in death. This was a promise Grankvist intended to keep. Quietly, the surviving divers began planning a second unauthorized recovery mission. They knew that they would be denied permission if they asked, so they kept their preparations secret. On March 22, 2014, a team of 27 divers descended on Plura. This time, the operation was meticulously planned. 2 teams of support divers worked in the shallower areas of the cave, ensuring that the main team had everything they needed for the deep dive. Grankvist, Pakarinen, and Kenan were the ones who would go deep, risking everything to retrieve the bodies of their fallen friends. Volin, still recovering from his own injuries sustained during the previous attempt, managed surface operations, coordinating the efforts of the entire team. The recovery mission was grueling and fraught with danger, but after 3 days, the bodies of Jari Hinen and Jari Uzumaki were finally brought to the surface. The Norwegian police, while pleased that the bodies had been retrieved, made it clear that several rules had been broken in the process. But for the surviving divers, those concerns were secondary to the fulfillment of their vow. In September 1984, on a warm weekend afternoon, 3 seasoned divers prepared for what they believed would be a straightforward exploration. Nuno Gomez, an experienced diver with a sharp sense of direction, led the team. Alongside him were Peter Verhouzel, whose curiosity often led him to push boundaries, and Malcolm Keeping, a cautious yet capable diver. Their destination was a remote, partially submerged chamber in South Africa's Sterkfontein caves, a site renowned for its ancient human fossils. The allure of the unknown, combined with the possibility of making a significant discovery, drove them into the murky depths. Sterkfontein, a cave system mostly comprised of dry passages, hides a network of underwater tunnels that had remained largely unexplored. Of the cave's many mysteries, only 10% is submerged, yet these watery passages are treacherous, uncharted territory that few dared to venture into. The divers had set their sights on pushing the limits of what had been previously mapped, hoping to uncover secrets buried for millions of years. Among the fossils, a 2.3-million-year-old skeleton of an early human had been found, providing invaluable insights into human evolution. This historical significance made the cave not only a site of interest for archaeologists, but also a tantalizing challenge for divers like Nuno, Peter, and Malcolm. Nuno had scouted the route just 2 weeks earlier, so he was confident as they navigated through the cave's narrow, winding passages. The group made their way through the elephant chamber, named for its peculiar rock formation that resembled an elephant's trunk, a landmark in their journey. After about 120 meters of squeezing through tight, claustrophobic spaces, they arrived at their destination, a small, oval-shaped chamber. It was no more than 3 meters wide and 1 meter high, but the sense of discovery was immense. The divers couldn't help but wonder if this was a place where early humans had once stood, 2.5 million years ago. The sense of excitement was palpable. The idea that they might be treading where no one had in millennia filled them with a rush of adrenaline. But time was limited, and after a brief exploration, they decided to head back. They swam in single file, Nuno in the lead, followed by Malcolm, with Peter bringing up the rear. It was during this return journey that things took an unexpected turn. Malcolm noticed that Peter, true to his nature, had strayed from the group. Peter was known for his adventurous spirit. He loved pushing the boundaries, often exploring further than was deemed safe. He wasn't the type to panic easily, having spent countless hours in dark, confined spaces underwater. This time, he had veered off to inspect something that had caught his eye, perhaps hoping to find a relic from the ancient past. But finding nothing of interest, he quickly made his way back to the main line, rejoining the others. Nuno and Malcolm waited, their lights cutting through the murky water until Peter's dim light appeared from a side passage. The trio continued their dive, but the atmosphere had changed. Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling of unease as they entered the Milner Hall chamber, a vast, complex space filled with side passages and cavities. Suddenly, he realized that Peter was missing again. The chamber was large enough to make it difficult to determine whether Peter had fallen behind or taken a different route. The two divers paused, scanning the chamber, but there was no sign of Peter. No bubbles, no light, no sound. Concern turned to worry as they realized they were losing precious time. They retraced their steps, searching every side passage they could safely explore, but Peter was nowhere to be found. Hours passed as they scoured the cave, but with their air running low, Nuno and Malcolm knew they had to call for help. They surfaced and immediately contacted the authorities. The first to arrive were fire brigade divers, but they refused to enter the water, citing their lack of experience with cave diving. The situation was growing more dire by the minute. The silt disturbed by their search had reduced visibility to just a meter, making the already dangerous conditions even more treacherous. Desperate for assistance, Nuno reached out to Craig Stevenson, another experienced diver who had explored the same tunnels with him just weeks before. Nuno and Craig resumed the search, pushing themselves to the limit. But as dawn broke, it became clear that their efforts were in vain. The police dive team arrived and took over the operation, but even they couldn't locate Peter. As the hours turned into days, the focus of the mission shifted from rescue to recovery. It was a heartbreaking realization for Nuno and Malcolm, who had hoped against hope that Peter would somehow be found alive. What they didn't know was that Peter was still alive, fighting for his life deep within the cave's labyrinth. Drawn by his insatiable curiosity, Peter had ventured into one of the side passages, eager to see what lay beyond the safety of the main line. But Sterkfontein is no ordinary cave. It's a dark, deceptive place where the surface is not an option for escape. At first, Peter thought he knew where he was going, but as he swam further into the cave, he began to realize he was lost. The feeling of being lost in a cave is unlike any other. At first, there's denial, a belief that you're still on the right path. But as the minutes pass and every turn brings you to a place that looks both familiar and strange, panic starts to set in. Peter's adrenaline surged as he swam in circles, desperately trying to find his way back to the main passage. He knew he was in trouble. Then, in the darkness, he saw it. A small hole above him with a faint silvery reflection. It wasn't much, but it was something. Peter squeezed through the narrow opening, scraping his gear and his skin in the process. On the other side, he found himself in a tiny air chamber with a small island. It was a brief moment of relief, but as the reality of his situation set in, Peter knew he was still in grave danger. He was alone, with no way to communicate with the outside world, and no idea how to escape. For what felt like hours, Peter sat in the dark, his flashlight turned off to conserve the last of its battery. He had air in his tank and water to drink, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. His mind raced with the fear that his friends might have assumed he had drowned and given up the search. He shouted into the darkness, hoping against hope that someone would hear him, but the only response was silence. Meanwhile, the police had sealed off the cave, barring anyone from entering. Even Nuno was kept away, unable to continue the search for his friend. Peter, trapped in the darkness, began to feel the effects of isolation and starvation. The days blurred together as he drifted in and out of sleep, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. He tried to explore the small chamber he was in, but every path led to a dead end. He was too scared to venture into the narrower passages, fearing he might get stuck. As time wore on, Peter's situation became more dire. He lost 44 pounds as his body consumed itself for energy. The darkness and silence became oppressive, leading him to the brink of madness. He began to hallucinate, his mind struggling to cope with the lack of stimuli. The only marker of time passing was the growth of his beard, which had become long and unkempt. It was a grim reminder of how long he had been trapped. 6 weeks after Peter had gone missing, the police called off the search. The caves were reopened, and Nuno and his friend Roger immediately returned. They were determined to find their friend, even if it meant bringing back his body. Roger searched the dry cave, while Nuno dove back into the water. On the first day, Nuno discovered a connection between the wet and dry caves, a potential lead that could finally bring them to Peter. Roger followed the lead, and soon made a heartbreaking discovery. Peter's body was found in a small chamber, near a sump about 100 meters from the nearest dry exit. He had left messages on the cave walls, trying to signal for help. He had held on for 3 weeks, hoping to be rescued. But in the end, starvation had claimed him. His final message, scrawled on the wall, read, "I love you, Shirley and Mom." On Wednesday, August 17th, 5 friends decided to meet up for dinner. Their laughter and chatter filled the air, but soon the conversation took an intriguing turn. During their meal, the conversation veered towards a local secret, a mysterious cave on the side of Y Mountain, right next to the BYU campus. During their conversation, one of the girls, Jennifer Gilbreth, told her last experience in the cave. Her past experience had been harrowing. She became hypothermic and passed out inside the cave, but her adventurous spirit had not been dampened. This cave, known to some adventurous students as Gollum's Cave, was a point of fascination and intrigue. Just a year prior, 2 young cavers had fully surveyed it, but it remained a formidable challenge, known only to those brave enough to explore its hidden depths. Jennifer Gilbreth convinced her friends to schedule a trip into the cave, emphasizing that they will surely not be able to make it through the 15-feet tunnel to the other side of the cave. From the outside, Gollum's cave didn't seem inviting. The entrance was partially submerged in a foot of water and required explorers to crouch through a narrow, nearly 100-foot tunnel. For most hikers, this would be an immediate deterrent, but for those in the know, the challenge of discovering what lay beyond was too alluring to resist. The real adventure began with a daunting task: navigating an 18 by 24-inch water-filled hole in the ground. Even seasoned explorers hesitated at this point, knowing that what awaited on the other side was a mix of excitement and danger. Determined to prove their courage, the friends decided to explore the cave that night. By the time they arrived at the cave, it was already 2 a.m. The darkness and early morning chill made the cave seem even more eerie. They sat outside for a while, gathering their courage before venturing into the shallow entrance. After a 15-minute-long debate of who should go first, Jennifer, having previously navigated the cave, took the lead. Her past experience had been harrowing. She became hypothermic and passed out inside the cave, but her adventurous spirit had not been dampened. Her confidence reassured the others. Blake, Scott, and Ariel decided to join her, while Joseph opted to wait outside the main cave, perhaps sensing the inherent risk involved in the exploration. With only a single flashlight between them, the four friends carefully approached the small opening in the cave floor. It was now 4:30 a.m., and the darkness outside was absolute. Jennifer took the plunge first, slipping into the cold, narrow passage. Her friends watched anxiously as she disappeared beneath the water, leaving only a small ripple behind. The tunnel was tight, no larger than a doorway, measuring just 2 feet wide and 4 feet high. One by one, Blake, Scott, and Ariel nervously followed Jennifer's lead, each taking a deep breath before submerging inside the cave. Her rope tied to a rock in the main chamber guided the way through the tunnel, secured to a piece of wood in the inner cave. This rope, though seemingly trivial, was a vital lifeline. The rope helped the cavers to navigate through the difficult path, and if you would miss the rope, the probability of you navigating the hole would be negligible. Previous explorers also had warned how easy it was to miss the exit. Brian Lamprey, a seasoned caver, once recounted a harrowing moment when he overshot the exit and found himself trapped in a dead end. The seconds he spent finding his way out were a chilling brush with death. Thankfully, he was able to make his way out of the hole just before he gasped with lungs full of water. Despite these risks, Jennifer, Blake, Scott, and Ariel made the short swim to the inner cave, a small space just 15 feet away. The inner cave was slightly more spacious, about 6.5 feet tall with a peak of 9 feet, providing a small air pocket above the water. Inside the cave, the explorers were likely feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The initial relief of surfacing inside the inner chamber would have quickly given way to discomfort. The air inside was likely bad air, the term used in caving to describe air that lacks the normal oxygen levels. In a cave with stagnant air and a closed water source, carbon dioxide buildup was inevitable, a situation exacerbated by the burning of candles inside the cave. With no airflow, carbon dioxide settled at the water level, creating a hazardous environment. The explorers, unaware of the poor air quality, would have found their ability to think, move, and breathe gradually impaired. The hole was suspicious enough to only accommodate one person at a time. Therefore, realizing the urge to act rapidly, Jennifer attempted to exit first. While navigating her way out, she faced a dire situation as she struggled to find the exit hole. The low oxygen levels, around 10 to 12%, severely reduced her ability to hold her breath. With only about a minute before she would lose consciousness, panic set in. The murky water, stirred up by sediment, made it even harder to see, and she may have lost grip of the guiding rope. Her chances of finding the way out quickly became slim, turning an already desperate situation into a tragic one. Back in the inner cave, the others waited in the dark, not knowing Jennifer was fighting for her life. After a brief wait, Ariel was next to attempt the exit. The elevated carbon dioxide levels would have doubled her respiration rate. Taking deep breaths before diving, she swam forward, only to encounter Jennifer's body in the tunnel. The reality of feeling her friend's lifeless body in the confined space heightened the panic. The supposed clear passage now felt claustrophobic, with no room for two to navigate the tight opening. The narrow tunnel, once a path of adventure, turned into a nightmarish trap as she realized just how little space there was to maneuver through. Blake and Scott, having spent even more time in the bad air, would have faced similar difficulties. Blake plunged into the water-filled tunnel, only to be confronted by the lifeless bodies of Ariel and Jennifer. The chaos intensified as he struggled to understand what was happening. In the dim light, the narrow tunnel felt even more suffocating. Ariel was unconscious and on the brink of death, leaving Blake in a state of sheer panic and desperation. Scott, the last to attempt the exit, would have suffered the longest exposure to the bad air. In his weakened state, he might have quickly lost consciousness upon encountering the others. Meanwhile, Joseph waited outside, unsure how long his friends would stay. With no clear plan in place, his anxiety grew as minutes turned into hours. By 5:30 a.m., still no sign of his friends. Joseph ventured into the cave and peered into the watery hole, seeing no movement or light. Confused and worried, he called some friends familiar with the cave. When they couldn't help, he finally contacted the police at 6:25 a.m. Joseph could only wait anxiously as authorities arrived. Rescuers immediately began pumping air into the cave to restore oxygen levels and pumped out water to create an airspace within the tunnel. After an hour of pumping, they discovered Jennifer's body floating inside the tunnel. Continuing their efforts, they found Ariel, Blake, and Scott together, all facing the exit hole. The evidence from the scene, Joseph's account, and the autopsies confirming drowning as the cause of death, pointed to a tragic sequence of events. The poor air quality and cramped tunnel had claimed the lives of 4 young, healthy individuals. To prevent future tragedies, the cave entrance was sealed with concrete, ensuring that no other explorers would face the same fate. Let us know what would you do in situations just like this in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic videos.